Green lights.
Okay, it's on now.
Oh,
Testing 1, 2.
yep, we're good.
Okay.
Sorry about
Let me
that.
start all over.
Yes,
They
please.
heard the first part.
Yes, please.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting, Budget Work Session, April 12, 2023, 4 p.m. This meeting is called to order. Welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena City Commission Budget Work Session. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's effort to broaden public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties. We welcome your public commentary during the meeting. Please read the following tips and guidelines for the app usage and your participation. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
City Attorney Doctor.
Here.
Manager Burton.
Here.
Commissioner Dean.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Shirtless.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Comments, questions from the commission? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, sorry to broach this subject as it touches on ARPA, but in the past, I have talked about the idea of setting aside some money for trees on Rodney Street.
Mhm.
And I understand that there's more concurrent information about possibility of that, and I just wanted everyone to know. So, and that would be Mr. Burton.
Oh, okay.
So Mayor, Commissioners, based upon the request from Commissioner Logan, we've done our due diligence. With your permission, I'd like to turn it briefly over to Director Smith so that bring the commission up to speed.
It's not your reporter.
No, it's
Okay. Director Smith, you have the floor.
Okay, Mayor, Commissioners, thanks for having us here today. Just to give a little bit of a timeline of the Rodney Street trees. The trees were ordered approximately a year ago and they are expected to be delivered in the next 2 weeks of the planned installation, while working with multiple divisions and departments within the city to have our arborist personally plant all the rest of the trees. And it is scheduled at this time for mid-May. There's been a lot of work put in with our team within the city from Public Works to interdivisions within Parks and Rec to ensure that it's done properly and as swiftly as possible while being as responsible as possible to get those trees planted.
I would,
What's the cost?
The cost of
Yes, sir.
all of the trees, I am not quite sure. We have our arborist, Chris Daly, online right now for any additional specifics that may be requested.
Mayor, I would just add that Commissioner Logan had asked, what would the possibility to upsize trees be?
Mhm.
And based upon discussions with our arborist and the fact that there's a curb and a sidewalk, you can only upsize so much. And so we've got, I think they're 3/4 inch trees, the best that you can buy, 3/4 to an inch. So we could only upsize another 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch at the most because of the root balls and the constraints. What we found in terms of our due diligence is that although we may be able to find some trees that would be of that larger size, that they're really readily not available. We ordered our trees last year, and these are the best trees that you can buy.
The premium.
And it fits with the 4 species that we have planted already. And so our recommendation is that we stick with the trees that we've already purchased. But I'm really impressed with the way Doug pulled Public Works in, and Ryan, you might speak with the type of equipment and crews that you've made available to assist the arborist.
Mayor Commission, one is Doug came to me and said, can you help us out? Because we have some roughly 70 trees that are in addition to what was in the contract. So instead of going back to the contractor and say, here, give us a change order, put the trees in, they weren't real excited about it. But he came to me and said, can you provide us with some workers and do you have any equipment that we could use? And one that is going to help out and save us without having to to put in additional laborers is our vac truck. We have a vacuum truck that when we're digging utilities, that it sucks out the dirt and everything. So we're able to supply that to him so that when they're grinding the stumps, they don't have to shovel everything and we just vacuum it up and can move on. So it's gonna be glad we can supply that. And now that they know about it, we're hopefully gonna have to hide it because they're probably going to ask for it some more. But yeah, it's a really neat piece of equipment to be able to vacuum out the holes and then help out with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Commissioner, our recommendation is that we proceed this way with the trees that we have. I think that between coordination of the departments, it's gonna really be a concerted effort to get the trees in, to get them in right. So that the neighborhood can see a good, efficient planting and the results quicker. And upsizing a little bit, does make some sense, except for the fact that we don't think that we can get the trees in any way that would match up with the trees that we've already purchased, which are not as big, but they're the best trees that you can buy.
But and bigger than what's there now.
Because, yeah, Mayor, because there's nothing there now.
I thought
It's where we had to remove all the trees.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, it just seems that that potential is not possible.
Right.
So anyway, just thought we all should know.
Okay,
So, thanks.
thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think at the last meeting I asked a question. It does seem like there were some trees planted on Rodney
That's what I thought.
a year ago. How did the ones coming compared to those, just so people understand what to expect in the next couple of weeks? Do they look like the ones that got planted a year ago? Ish.
There,
Well, my understanding from the arborist is the premium trees that were purchased were much higher level grade than the trees that were installed or planted by the subcontractor. And there was a wide range from what is planted to what the city has purchased at a higher level of a premium tree.
but they are the same four species, so it'll all blend.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other commission comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask our arborist or anybody here at the table, do we know how much it costs per tree and what the total cost will be?
He's.
Thank you.
Mayor, commissioners, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
So the cost for the trees that I purchased is approximately $13,000.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Okay. Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council. Are you available?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, I don't see representative.
City Manager's report.
Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to ask Director Leland to give the commission an update on where we are with the sustainability master plan. And if you're all right with that, Ryan, you want to speak to it?
Mayor and Commission, we brought it up when we bring the sustainability coordinator and sustainability plan of what we've done and that we would like to have a sustainability plan in the budget moving forward so that we can have, systematic look at what we can do and set up a CCIP and then what is viable and where we can get. So it is logical and in there and sustainable. We were able to find money in the already existing budgeted projects that we had for sustainability. There are 3 projects that are out there. One is the photovoltaic, is solar panels that will be completed by the end of this month out at the shop. So they're moving ahead. And so that's good. Then it's also the vehicle charging station that we got a grant for. That's going out at the golf course once we get the ground thaws. So that's moving ahead. And then there was some properties that we were looking at the downtown, but that's kind of shifted. But those 3 projects, we are able through what Leah Anderson and Ed Coleman were able to do. We were able to save $100,000 in what we were projecting So we're asking if we could do a budget, if the commission be okay to do a budget adjustment for that additional money that we aren't going to spend that's already been budgeted to put towards a sustainability plan and get started on it now instead of waiting for the budget to be approved. So we'll get a jump start on it and it'll just give us more time to get any capital projects or any projects that we may want to do next budget cycle that much more into the budget. So it'd help us out if we could get this set out, and we will be looking at all parking lots for vehicle charging stations, solar, water, energy. And we have found in Ithaca, New York, that has a sustainability plan that they have done that we're modeling it after. So it looks pretty good, and they charged about 100,000. So we think we're in the ballpark right now, but we'd rather get started and get a contract before the budget starts. So if you're okay with that, we'll do the budget adjustment and move forward.
Commissioners?
Mr. Mayor,
Please go ahead.
I think we should move fast sooner rather than later. So I'm very much in support of that. Really excited you noted the Ithaca plan. Their former mayor is in one of the organizations, young elected officials that I'm part of. I just left to take a different job, but he was part of that, and it was the coolest process that they went through and made some huge strides. So if we need any connections, people in there, I can certainly reach out to him because I know he still lives there, but is no longer the mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is great news. I had, one of my notes was, where's the sustainability plan going to be in the budget? So I know where to look for it. So I am absolutely thrilled that we can get it started now.
Go ahead.
So relative to a budget adjustment, is that formal action at a regular meeting, or how does that?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner. How a budget adjustment works is, as long as it's within the same fund and we're not increasing overall appropriations, we can kind of move funds around in the budget, but this funding is in the general capital funding, and it was specifically earmarked for these particular projects. So that's why they wanted to just come to you to ask if they can just take it from those partial funding from those earmarked projects into the sustainability plan study. So it's not a real formal budget amendment, but it's an adjustment. It's kind of an internal process, and we have the city manager sign off on it. But because it was earmarked, we wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you. I'm okay with it. But today we had that dedication for the sweeper. You have a station already for it? Charging station? Where's that?
At the fleet maintenance.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Congratulations on the savings. I think that's great. Finding an innovative use for it, going for a sustainability plan, I think it'd make a lot of people happy. So yeah, thanks for this innovative idea. Appreciate it.
Are you done with your report?
I am. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Department reports. FY 24, general overview, Manager Burton or Director Danielson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just do a brief, broad introduction of the way that staff has approached the budget. Mayor, as you well know, last year, commissioners, we made what I consider to be major strides in providing health insurance benefits to city employees that were competitive with the state of Montana and with our friends across the hall at the county. Substantial changes that to some degree, people were paying somewhere around $700 a month out of their own pocket for a family policy, which was not competitive in the marketplace. And I think now they pay around $200-250.
Yeah, so they could have paid up to almost $800 under the prior structure. Current structure mirrors the state where they pay $30 for individual coverage, $100 if they have children on the plan, $250 if they have spouses covered, and then it's $330 if they have their family. So
And that's
significant savings.
And that's comparable to the state of Montana benefits. And of course, going into last year's budget, our projections were just that. Who's going to sign up for what? And so part of this budget represents the fact that we're able to represent the budget with the actual numbers this year, and we missed the mark by $70,000 in the general fund, so we adjust to that. In addition to that, our pool at MMIA, their actuarial, I think, represented a 13% increase this year recommendation. Their board came back with a 9% increase for health insurance. And as you know, the medical insurance, so this budget represents an increase in the permissive levy for health insurance, where you have the authority to levy more based upon the cost of health insurance within the general fund. And we'll get obviously to the specifics of that. But that sets the stage where in year 2, we've actually, if you agree with our approach, we've set the stage to provide those health insurance benefits at that level in a competitive market moving forward. So next year, we'll just build off of that. And like I say, we'll get into the actual permissive levy and the revenues as we work our way through the budget process. The other priority, and as you know, the commission funded a market-based pay plan last year. And step 1 is to look at the market. Step 2 will be next year to look at the matrix and how we compare compared to other markets. Do we have 5 steps or do we go 7 steps? Those type of policy decisions will come back. But as a part of the market-based plan, we also recognize that there are a group of positions that were what we at the staff level have been calling outliers. And that means that they were further away from the market than the bulk of city employees. So we set a benchmark that to lay the foundation so that all positions are similarly away from the market. We set that benchmark at 88% of the market at step 3. So those who were not there, we brought them up to 88% of the market at step 3. So all of our positions in this budget are at that level or above. And then thirdly, this budget represents a 4% COLA for city employees, which is comparable to what the state of Montana is doing and what Lewis and Clark County is doing. So with that, and we still have some decisions to make within the confines of a balanced budget. But those were the priorities that we worked on to bring forward in this draft budget, and that's what this budget represents. So I think that's about the introduction we talked about, isn't it, Shelby?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chairman.
So with that, Mayor, I think that's the general overview, and certainly would entertain any questions the commission may have.
Yes, please.
Just a quick clarifying question. I was trying to understand I know we're going to get to the HR budget, but there's a pay plan study. You said that's related to the matrix, but we set this based on a matrix. But we're going to look at the matrix. Can you help me understand?
Yes.
Thank you.
So when the commission approved the market-based pay plan last year, there were 2 elements to it. The first was to look at the market.
Right.
Then the second, which would be the second year this year, was to look at the matrix. Now, we may look at that and not recommend any changes. So we have where do positions fit at step or at, grade 25 or grade 32? And do we want to stay with 5 steps or do we want to do something different?
But the step 3 you were referring to is,
The present structure.
okay, so we're going to possibly change the structure, but we set it based on the old structure.
Correct.
Just wanted to
And
make sure I got that.
and so Commissioner, we haven't done our homework yet on the structure. So it's the existing structure, but everybody is at least at 88% of the market at step 3 or above. So that sets the foundation moving forward. Correct.
Exactly. Explained it very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Comments? Any others? Okay. Public comments? Any raised hands?
None online, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on. FY budget, city manager's office, grants coordinator.
Excuse me, Mayor. We're not done with the overview yet.
Okay, I thought I saw some approval when I said you done.
I
Okay.
think we want to move quickly.
Listen to Danae, she told us 5 o'clock, so that's good.
So, if I may.
Please.
Mayor, thank you. So thank you, Manager Burton, for giving that general overview of the budget. Again, this has been, I think, a very productive year with working with Manager Burton and setting processes and procedures, and also allowing the groups to get together to learn more about each of our different divisions and working together. So I think it's been a great process this year. We're still, adjusting as necessary as we move forward, but I think we're getting there. And this year has been a lot smoother than the prior year. And I think everybody's been working together very, very well. And so I've been very pleased with the budget process this year. And I just want to also, this is Zach Smith, our budget officer. And so without him, we really couldn't have pulled all this off as well. So I wanted to make sure I make a note of his help as well throughout this process. So I did want to just briefly start with the budget schedule that we laid out. So as you know, thank you very much for setting 2 special meetings, including this one and an additional one, so that we could get through all of the department presentations. As you can see, there's quite a few to get through. Each division is, hopefully going to stay within 5 to 10 minutes, depending upon the division. I think that a water capital is probably going to take a little bit longer than a finance credit card fee. So, but we're going to try to get through these as efficiently as possible. If you have any questions or comments on the schedule, I can address them now.
Well, I wonder, Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a really quick question? This is, I like in like the narrative piece. And I don't know if I'm gonna be jumping the gun or not. But it was just about the contingency account reserve change.
And that'll be into I'm going to move on to budget policies. Great. Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on to budget. Let's see. So a couple of years ago, I brought budget policies forward as part of the budget adoption process. And last year, I think they stayed fairly the same. We made some minor adjustments, but this year I did make a couple of adjustments. And I think that the one that addresses your question is the let's see, the contingency reserve. So after speaking with Manager Burton, to allow just a little bit more flexibility in using those funds instead of trying to define what an emergency is. I think that many different things could fall under what an emergency is. Obviously, setting a contingency aside is just that, for unexpected events that come up that may need or warrant the city manager the flexibility to come to the commission and ask to extend those funds. So that is the reason for changing some of the language in the contingency reserve, and not just calling it, emergency and trying to define what an emergency was, but to give a little bit more flexibility.
Mayor, can I add to that? At the same time, so that money won't be used without notifying the governing body. But at the same time, we cut the manager's contingency from 100,000 to 30,000.
And thank you,
Is
Manager
that
Burton.
correct?
That's a bit of a separate contingency line item.
Yep.
We also have the ability, if we have the funds available, there's an allowance to set, 1% of operating revenues for manager flexibility in operations. This year we had to cut that way back to down to 25,000 in order to fund the priorities of health insurance and wages in the budget.
Okay, So, and then I get, so most of the things. You would come back to the commission. Whether it requires action or not, but as like a formal update, is that?
All of the expenditures that may come out of the contingency fund will first be visited with the governing body before they're spent.
Great.
Any other questions on that change in the budget policies? There's another section. And this speaks to reserves for contingency, and I just wanted to clarify where that money will lie. It'll be moved out of the general fund into the general capital fund. The general capital fund is really an extension of the general fund, but for GASB standards and accounting purposes, capital doesn't belong in the general fund, but it really is an extension of the general fund. We're just transferring the money from a segregated account in the general fund and moving that cash into the general capital fund. And so that's what that language change is. The annual contingency reserve, which I indicated, will be proposed by the city manager if possible. So that's the line item where the manager had originally budgeted 100,000 and scaled it back to 25,000. I think the last major change that I made to the budget policies is on the indirect cost allocations. And I did redline these so that I could highlight them for the commission to know. We set this allowance to do a look back adjustment last year. This was the first year that we had to go through that exercise. And finding going through that exercise with a 10% variance was, I guess, it was more work than the benefit that we received. So we want to just raise that threshold to 15%. And so what that does is we're budgeting on last year's budget. And then once we get through actuals, if there's a 15% more than actuals than what was allocated to other funds, then we kind of correct that for the other funds so that we're not distributing or we're not allocating cost to funds that aren't receiving the services.
Right.
Any questions on that? Okay. So that concludes budget policies. So I will say that coming forward as a budget policy that's not in here, but I just haven't had time to speak to the manager with a thorough plan, was I'd really like to introduce an investment policy. As treasury rates are at the highest I've seen them in my local government history right now, I really think that we could capitalize on investing in longer term government securities to lock in these rates for a longer period of time and then step into a ladder. But I just want to let you know that in the future, I'll likely be coming to the commission with that after I've had an opportunity to work with the manager on that.
Can I ask another question?
So the next piece in the, yes, sorry.
Just one more,
Yes, so
and I don't know if this is gonna come when we talk about public works, but the addition of that industrial facilities.
thank you, yes.
What-
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, so last year or fiscal 23, we added a new division called industrial facilities. We didn't really know where to put it. So it ended up in the general fund, but it's 100% fully allocated out to the enterprise funds that that particular division supports. So I just added that into the budget policies as far as the allocation so that you understood that when you see the industrial facilities department in the general fund, along with public works admin and engineering, that those three departments are allocated out to enterprise funds.
Yeah, and just very briefly, and I know that we'll talk about it later, Mayor and Commissioner. There is a recognition that the skill set to manage a building like this with the offices is completely different than running a water treatment plant and maintaining that. And so the skill sets are different, and this budget recognizes that.
Any others on the budget policies? Thank you. So I want to move on to the revenue forecast for the general fund. As you can see, the biggest change in forecasting for fiscal 24 is in taxes, and it's an increase of almost $1.7 million forecasted for tax revenue. I will tell you that most of that is our proposed increase to the permissive health levy. I also allowed for assessed values to increase by a certain percentage, about 5%. So that plays into that as well. We do have annexations that have been brought into the city since the last forecast, so that plays into our tax base as well. So as far as tax revenues, it's just a forecast now. We get our assessed values in August, and I will be evaluating our assessed values then. And then we will have to either make, cutbacks or appropriate adjustments in our expenditures if that forecast ends up to be too high than what it is now. So I just wanted to indicate that's a caveat right now for our tax forecast. The other big proponent in the general fund is our state shared revenue. The $5.5 million, that is an amount that's given to us by the state. So they've already forecasted that amount. That is a known amount that we will get next year. And where we saw a decline is the intracity charges. And I'll explain that it kind of goes back to the budget policies. So when we're allocating out general fund overhead and operating costs to other funds, for example, myself and my department, we get allocated out to all the funds. Well, so do engineering and public works admin and city manager, attorney, etc. We had some significant vacancy cost backs. And so when I did that exercise to compare actuals to what was budgeted, it represented a pretty significant credit back to the funds because those vacancies. I think that this was, and I'm hoping, an anomaly where that will happen because it did impact obviously the general fund and having to cut back even more expenditures because of that. But moving forward, I think we're starting to hire people, and I'm hoping that that's a good trend going forward, and that this huge credit that we had to give this year was an anomaly. And that's we have minor revenues, in fines and forfeitures. That's technically, but primarily comes from the court. They are limited in their ability to collect on outstanding funds. And so I think when I talked to the court administrator about a year ago, they had well over $1 million in outstanding fines that they just have limited ability to collect on those. So we don't really project large increases in collection of court fines. Licenses and permits, those are our business licenses, animal licenses, and some special permits that come out of the general fund. Fairly stable revenue. We're not proposing to bring any changes to our licensing fees this year, but it is something that I'll be looking to bring back to the commission next year. My utility customer service director or supervisor did some analysis down there on how much time it takes them to process these, and then in addition to comparing to what other cities like, we charge minimal for a business license, but I know that there's also legislation in place to potentially take away local licensing. So it's not something that we want to address this year until we understand the outcome of that. That's it for general fund revenues. If anybody has any question on that.
Please go ahead.
So relative to the taxes, you said the bulk of that, so from last budget year to this, that's about 12.5% roughly.
Yeah.
So the bulk of that is the permissive levy, and we are authorized to do that without restriction of voter or anything of that nature.
Yes, Mayor, you are, and that's the title permissive levy, so it's not under 1510,420, which is the half the rate of inflation over the last 3 years average. It was a recognition when the big bill was passed and the cap was put on that the inflationary growth of health percent clearly outweighed inflation. And it has every year since then. So the legislature gave you the authority and all other local governments to
Except for
respond
school
with
districts.
with the exception of the school districts.
With the exception of school districts.
I didn't realize
They're the
that.
only ones that can't permissibly levy for health insurance.
Mm.
Hopefully this bill right now is about to fix that.
Yeah, so anyway, yes, you do have that authority.
So, Mr. Mayor, one other question. So the assessed values of properties. How often is that assessed by the state?
Every other year.
So
Everything
is
is-
this a year that
Yes, sir.
they are assessing, and so we should expect those values to go up?
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, and to what degree, we're not sure. But
Mr. Thanks. But one of the, with that, do we have an idea? Well, two questions. One, since those are being assessed, the lag time if people are protesting, do we see a big change normally if people protest those values?
You know, I don't think so, but I think we should look into that. And that's easy enough to do with the county and the tax appeal board to get those numbers for you.
I think that'd be helpful, just
Yeah.
given
Yeah,
some of the sentiments that I've been hearing the last few months up
Yep.
there. I'd rather us be prepared for,
we'll look at those numbers and report back at the next budget meeting.
okay, cool. And then the other piece on the fees that we charge, will we be able to see any kind of like efficiency savings as the ERP system continues to roll out? Or do you think that will not affect how we collect fees?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Dean. Yes, I do think that the new system is going to create a lot of efficiencies. Especially in the licensing division and also in the utility billing. We're implementing utility billing last, so because that's technically going to be the most complicated module to implement. I do know, having to have stepped in their shoes for a couple of months after I first got here, it's a very manual, cumbersome process that they have, and not something that I'm used to with some of the other utility billing softwares that I've worked with. You know, so as we grow, as the city grows, as more accounts, that could have potentially added another staff member down there. But I think that with the efficiencies that the software is going to create, we won't have to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Any others on revenue,
Or you-
manager revenue?
I just wanted to briefly, when you're done, engage the commission.
Okay, I just also after here, we've included our draft overview of the general fund. Right now, as of this packet, we're balanced. And that was purposeful. As we ended up taking in all of requests from all of the departments. I think that with the cuts that people were taking last year, they kind of crept back into the budget for good reason. And we had to then ask everyone in the general fund to make a 6%, across the board overall to their asks, so that we could balance and so that we could afford a 4% COLA, and also for the city to pick up the tab on the 9% increase of the health insurance. So it represents, I think, a very conservative, prudent budget with no excesses. I will tell you that. We have worked with all of the department heads in the city, and they were all very very good to work with and making sure that we can present a balanced budget to the commission. We're still making some changes, and so this is subject to change. But this is where we're at now, and then this is a general overview of all of the departments in the general fund. And so you'll be able to hear from each department what their proportionate share of the general fund total is in their presentations.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah.
Really quick
You
question.
bet.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, we had talked about some fee increases, and my brain is pudding right now, so forgive me if we've been over this, but I'm looking at the revenue, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff for like swimming and stuff. Are those based on the new assumed rates?
Yes, Commissioner,
Okay,
they
so
are, yeah,
all
but
of these
conservative
things are-
because they'll go into effect halfway through there, or I think they're gonna, if approved, we're gonna be bringing those back to the commission.
Okay.
But there may be a delay in recognizing some of that revenue, so it's a very modest increase to what they're proposing.
So it assumes an increase, but with some conservatism
Yes.
based on in there. Cool,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, and if the commission does not approve of them, then we'll go back in and make the necessary adjustments to the budget.
Okay.
And Mayor, I would just add on the requested reduction, what we focused on, and of course, one size doesn't fit all, but the operating budgets for the general fund came in at a 12% increase. We asked everybody to cut back to a 6% increase, which was the 6% cut. Now, that's different depending upon the department. But it does represent an increase, but half of what was requested.
Thank you. This is more of a statement, and I want to be clear first, that I appreciate everything that goes into doing a budget and balancing it, and I applaud you for that, and I get it. I do, just generally, I think we talk about what are our priorities and do our budgets reflect our priorities, and I still don't feel like we've had that conversation as a commission. And I don't know if we can have it as we go, but I do. I want to be mindful that we are making decisions and, reducing the amount of the asks, and we are prioritizing in our budget. So if we can occasionally just check in on ourselves, what our priorities, because as you said, every department is different, and it was not a one size fits all, but I want to make sure that we are taking the opportunity to reflect our priorities in our budgeting process. Thanks.
Mayor and Commissioner Reed, I really appreciate that comment. I believe that as we're moving through each department's presentation, during those presentations, it will give you more of a clear insight on what each department has budgeted and what they've called out. And that will be your opportunity to have that conversation on whether or not your priorities are being reflected in the overall budget throughout the city.
Gotcha.
On that note, Mr. Mayor, I don't know how you all are planning to do the narrative piece for each department, but I know in the past, sometimes it was a little confusing with, we use different acronyms, and there was also, it's looked different every year. But one thing I think that has been helpful in previous years is when there's, and not even a work plan, but we have a really clear idea of like, these are the big goals for the department this year, whether it's consistent with or in addition to what they're already doing. And so I don't know if we necessarily, I think it's helpful to the public to spell that out. But I think if we can maybe start each of those budget presentations with just even a clear picture of what the department's proposing is those priorities that kind of speak to the larger vision of the city.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Dean. I do know that the presentations that folks are putting together, there are some that are just going to have talking points to discuss that. There are a few that are including them in their PowerPoint presentations. And we will be putting, when we put together the full budget book, we will have the individual department narratives all updated and in the budget book.
Awesome, thanks.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that is of interest to me as we're moving along this, as we look at the increase relative to taxes is how best to inform the public that, this is kind of the road we're heading down and it's important. I mean, clearly health insurance and pay are important facets for any organization and it, clearly costs and whether it's through the public information officer's office or otherwise, but letting the public know early that this is where we're heading.
Mayor, I think that's a very good point. And certainly we can work on the explanation and work with the commission on that. I think we talked early on in terms of the approach that the staff was going to take relative to priorities, but that doesn't assume that that's the commission priorities. But certainly I wanted to communicate that early on so that at least when this came forward, you weren't surprised.
Right.
But points well taken. And I think that we have time to do that, especially as you start to formulate where you're comfortable relative to the budget, the proposed budget.
One more tiny
Yes.
question. Sorry. On page 26, I think I know the answer to this. I just want to make sure I'm clear. The contribution from general fund cash reserves. There's an increase of 2,000 at Helena Area Community Foundation and a decrease of 2,000 to two individual things. I'm assuming that they would move under HACF. Is that the?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Reed. Yeah, I hadn't quite gotten to that page yet,
Okay, sorry.
but I'm happy to move on if there are no other questions on the overview of the general fund.
No.
Okay, great. So in your packet, you have the contributions from general fund cash reserves. So I will tell you, because of our the cost of providing quality healthcare to our employees and affording a 4% COLA and making market adjustments. And then even asking folks to cut their budgets back by 6%. There was really not any room in our operating budget to fund some of these contributions. And so what the commission then will decide on how you would like to fund these particular programs. And my recommendation is to fund a few of them out of cash reserves. And one of them is the solar energy program. The second is the sidewalk improvement program. The third would be anything above our policy level of contributing 100,000 to the Affordable Trust Fund. So right now that is part of our operating budget, the 100,000, because it's part of a resolution that we're required to. We do also fund the Humane Society and the Community Service Program support. Those two contributions are subject to our joint meeting with the county. And then the remaining ones under the community program, the recommendation that staff provided a couple of years ago, and I think that Ms. Opitz can speak a little bit more to it, is that the staff was having difficulty trying to prioritize asks from the community with really no set procedure or history on how to distribute funds out to community needs. And so we made the decision, or the commission made the decision, to move that funding over to Helena Area Community Foundation and let the experts go through and with their vetted process to be able to support community asks. And we had two outliers that were still in the operating budget of last year, which is the Sunrun and Big Sky Pride. The commission chose to fund both of those events for $1,000 each. And so my recommendation is to move those and increase the contribution to Helena Area Community Foundation, and then have those folks then apply to HACF for their funding rather than having it earmarked in our budget. A couple exceptions to that is the MBAC and then the symphony. And Tim, if you can speak to that, or I can also say that those are those, especially MBAC is something that the city has funded for several years, and then as well as the symphony. But again, all of this is your decision on how you would like to handle funding these community events. I'm just indicating that right now, these the solar, the sidewalk, and the community programs below are currently not in our operating budget and would need to be a decision to take that out of our cash reserves.
Yeah,
Can I just get a clarifying question on that? Thank you. Director Danielson, so they've been sort of pushed out of the operating budget. Would they be able to go back in there at some point? Or are we saying that they will never be able to fit in there because of the new cost of health insurance?
I would address that question, Commissioner. We think that it's time for you to revisit the policy as to whether you all put it into the foundation or whether you continue to fund them the way that at the level that we are. We think that's a decision because the last time those decisions were made, it was a completely different commission. Do you concur that that's still a priority? And if so, can we take it out of the operating budget and fund it through cash or other means? Or do you want to put it all into the community foundation and have them allocate the money? The other one that we've contributed to for 100 years is the Helena band.
The capital band.
The capital band. So, and not that we have to have that discussion today, but we want to tee it up and get specific direction on how you want to approach that moving forward in this budget. So I think we can bring it back at a later point in our budget discussions to get a clear decision on how you want to approach it.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, if it's helpful, I can give some background because it was when Commissioner Logan and I first got on the commission, it was the first year that the discussion was, there were a lot of kind of various organizations that were receiving funding, but then we weren't really getting reports of how it was impacted. Some of them weren't even in the county, but so it was a whole thing. And so the idea was to be a little bit more objective about how we went about it. And there was a kind of ad hoc committee that was formed, and I was a commission representative. Chris Cooley was leading it up when he was in the finance office, and I think Amanda, were you helping with the grant?
I believe that
Review.
was actually our former public information officer, Rebecca Connors.
Yes, okay, yep, that's right, yep. God help, yeah, it was a while ago. And we ended up spending, it was like a 10-hour day reviewing all and scoring all the applications, and at the end of it, we said this is not a good use of city employee time. And so at that, yeah, I took a whole day off work. And so then we said, let's go to Helena Area Community Foundation, who has an expertise in this, has grant committees already together who do this, every single meeting. And I think it worked out really well. And then we did make some amendments. So part of the issue, Symphony of the Stars was actually included in that, but in that first year, but they did not score high enough in the grant review. And so we didn't end up funding them. But then there was a discussion during commission comments and an amendment the first year to fund them separately. So we did that. And then the same thing happened with the Sun Run. Big Sky Pride came up because it was the first year that we were dealing with the waiver of or waiving the ordinance. I forget how we characterized it, but for the open container piece. And it was to cover the insurance costs for them, for us to be a partner in helping alleviate the stress that this, it was causing in getting, because it's obviously a really important event that we want to stay in Helena and downtown. So that's how we said, well, we will cover the insurance costs that we are requiring you to get. And that happened as a separate amendment as well. I think it's worth that discussion. I think that on the ones that are events, I don't know how much they, like the Sun Run, I don't know if they typically are applying for grant funding necessarily. So I think maybe it's two separate conversations of what are we sponsoring as a city? And then what are we granting money for ongoing programming? But that's kind of the history of where that came from.
Quick comment, sorry, thank you. I would say the way you framed it is really helpful with regard to the city programs, the top three. I think those are really important policy questions, and I would like to revisit that whenever it seems appropriate. I was surprised to see those three come out of operating budget. I think it is those seem like things that would be priority discussions, so I would very much like to come back to that.
Commissioner, can I clarify about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Yeah,
So
it's
the
above.
the $100,000 is
Yes.
currently represented. It's if you want to choose to allocate anything above the policy level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's all I have with that. We can certainly come back and revisit what the commission's priorities are. I can't, I think it is like Commissioner or Manager Burton indicated, this is a policy decision for the commission to determine whether you want it in your base operating costs year after year, or if it's something that you want to look at every single year and determine, or so we will make sure that this topic is on another agenda in our budget discussions.
Here, to conclude, I think results matter, and I just want to let the commission know that the staffing challenges that we've had and still do to some degree, I just want to be very brief that we're making progress. So we were 2 police officers down, but last week or the week before, we had a young police officer resign because he's moving his family to another community. So we're 3 down. We've got 3 in the academy right now. We are now able to hire all of our transportation bus drivers. And so I think we're just about fully staffed. We've been able to hire a very senior accountant in the finance department. I think we're very close on bringing a top quality engineer onto the public works department, which has been a challenge. We've hired a planner 1 in the community development department, and I think we're very close to hiring a planner 2, which fully staffs that agency. I think we're just about ready, perhaps, to hire a prosecutor attorney in the city attorney's office. If all of that comes to fruition, then other than normal turnover, I think we're staffed up again. So I think that we're starting to show progress through the decisions that have been made up to this point relative to our ability to staff positions within the city. And with that, I think it concludes our introduction.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Director Danielson?
Mayor,
Gee, that was just terrible.
maybe, pardon?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. If I may, on that, your comment about the police department staffing. So I can't remember, it seems like 53 FTEs is there. Is what they're funded for, or
Commissioner Logan, they have 53 sworn officers.
right?
They also have their evidence clerks and their administrative staff and animal control, but 53 sworn officers.
Thank you for that clarification. So of those 53, we have 50.
Correct. And Mayor, I would just add that I this morning was in on lieutenant interviews with the police chief. And once he makes that final decision, the police administration will be completely staffed as well.
Okay. Okay. Public comments. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Okay, so we'll move on to the city manager's office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I promise I'll be far more brief than I usually am when I'm in front of you. So what you have in front of you is more or less essentially a status quo budget for the city manager's office. Moving on the next slide back. Within our office, we do have 3 focus areas: administration, that's obviously Manager Burton and our administrative assistant Stephanie Reinhardt. Public information with Jake Burson, and grants administration, which is my position. So you'll note in FY23, we had an adopted budget of 707,000 and change. With an FY23 projected budget at 745,141. The difference there is that we had a $30,000 carryover. So between our adopted and projected, so adopted last year. And then additionally, as a budget activity, the finance office had included vacancy savings. We, thanks to Tim for sticking around, didn't actually realize any vacancy savings as we were fully staffed for the full year. So that is the difference there that you'll see between what was adopted and what's projected for this year. You'll see a significant cut for our preliminary budget for this year. That does reflect a significant cut to the contingency that we spoke about earlier. About $75,000 was cut from that. Some notable expenditures, some of these are not new, just to provide some information for the commission to consider. We do budget a fair amount of citywide software out of our budget. The public engagement module, our Be Heard Helena website, Frevo Form, which is a form builder that all of our city departments use and helps feed into the new city website. Our social media management, and then also Archive Social, which is we are legally bound to archive our social media for discovery. So that's the tool that we use to do that. Your strategic plan, which I think has been a topic of interest for all of you, has been budgeted in our contingency. So that contingency, while it went from roughly 100,000 to 30,000, that 25,000 should encompass your commission strategic planning. We also have a $5,000 obligation to the Montana League of Cities and Towns Conference as the host city for this coming year. So we'll be hosting that in October. We have encouraged departments, obviously, given the level of cuts that have been made. Often training and conferences tend to be one of the first things to get cut. But we have encouraged many of our departments this year to budget as many staff members as they are able to attend that, as we are the host this year.
Great.
And that concludes everything in the city manager's budget, unless you have other questions.
Commissioners, please.
Thank you. Making an interesting point that I had forgotten. I remember when the city of Helena first got into social media, was the idea of archiving for legal purposes. I think each of us sitting here have our own sort of social media as elected officials. Is that? I guess I hadn't really even considered that. Is that something that we should be thinking about?
That might be a better question directed to the city attorney's office.
And maybe it's not relevant to today's meeting, but I'd be interested in maybe talking offline about that.
Can you clarify that?
Well, perhaps Amanda, you could explain a little bit more the the archive social.
You bet, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Logan. So that tool is a tool for archiving the social media that we put out. So the city manages between our departments social media accounts on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. That is public record, considered public record. And so we are required to make sure that we have that available. We need a tool that helps us archive that. I don't know specifically the answer to your question, Commissioner Logan, in terms of if that extends to elected officials in your individual social media. That's maybe something that we can chat about with the attorney's office.
so in Montana, but it's like the federal level, like it falls under the National Archive, so for like US senators, you'll see they'll have their, or even the president, whoever, they have, anyone at the federal level, they'll have their, the government one, and all of that falls under the jurisdiction's National Archives when they're done. And then, or like Secretary of the Senate, for example, but then they'll have like the campaign one or the more public one. But there isn't state law that I'm aware that anyone, some states I know are looking at that, but not something that we necessarily fall under as of now.
I can say just generally that our Constitution allows for the transparency of government, which is very broadly interpreted by case law, and that you would likely have to produce whatever you include in your capacity as a commissioner. How you do that is kind of up to you and up to the city on how to produce that, but we can talk more specifically about that outside these.
Thanks.
That could take a long time. I've been in many of those conversations.
Well, and why they're trying to push legislators to only use their MT.gov and not their personal, yet most are still, many are still using those.
Okay. Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
Okay,
Can I ask for public comments on this? Are there any public comments for Coordinator Opitz?
Mr. Mayor, I have no hands raised and no written public comment online.
Okay, you have the floor now.
So Commissioners, Mayor, this is the clerk's office and the office of the commission's operating budget, we'll call it. Obviously, you set policy for the citywide, but this is more reflective of internal operations for the bud or for the office itself, or the staff folks that serve you. I'll just go briefly through this slide that talks about our budget is quite small compared to others, as you will know, but it includes a bevy of things, anywhere from the truly operations side that serves the city as a records department. So the software that's behind the digitization project and the modernization of our records program, all the way up to codification services, which help serve the city attorney's office, as well as the commission and the policies that you put into our city code. Overall, the operating budget for the commission and the clerk has decreased slightly since FY23, even above and beyond the 6% that's been discussed already. Partly due to not having to purchase large, we'll call them tools or resources, hardware, equipment for the modernization and digitization for the records. Also, we did, as you all well know, fund the city manager recruitment, as well as the look back, we'll call it, of the process with CMS in fiscal year 23. Thankfully, at that time, the interim city manager, now permanent city manager, Mr. Burton, focused on stabilization as part of the FY23 budget. Taking into consideration some of the conversations I've had with all of you and policy decisions you highlighted for the operations side of things in the clerk and commission office, we've shifted dollars away from those large purchases and no longer having to fund that very important process, and focused instead this year on training up myself and newly funded staff, Curtis, who's been a blessing to the modernization of everything, and Alex, who's been amazing in helping me get myself on track. We're going to work on training ourselves up this year and taking those new big tools, fancy toys we have for modernization, and getting more certifications, I guess, and training in order to shift, hopefully down the road, dollars away from having to rely on external support for that software, And Curtis and Alex and I will be able to do that internally, which I think is a long-range plan of saving money for our office. So, moving on. So I broke it out into the three major areas. The supplies and materials section, you'll see there's a decrease of 12.2% approximately. And that's reflective of the large scanning equipment that was purchased for we call them the Harry Potter books. Very large, odd records that we have that we need to digitize as part of the overall project. And then we purchased multiple softwares that assist in that overarching project. This year, we no longer have to fund those purchases for the scanning equipment, but instead are looking at did an internal audit of the software that we purchased and focused on what actually was being utilized versus what some folks weren't, and so decreased software budgets where we could. And again, focusing on training ourselves to rely less on external support. The purchase services, again, this was the budget that held the city manager process evaluation and recruitment services. We're using that to help get the deputy clerk started on her continuing ed credits for her certification as a clerk. Getting additional training on records management. Also, some of you, a majority of you have asked for a discussion potentially on bylaws and best practices. So we put some money into this fund to maybe have a facilitated discussion about that later on, separate or maybe together with the strategic plan with the city manager's office. I just wanted to make sure we did put some dollars away for that. That also includes additional dollars for the board's project, and that's so that we can potentially fund more assistance from the local government center, other external parties to help facilitate discussions with you all for your best practices with the boards and committees that advise you, and even fund an additional training per year for the boards and committees to participate in open meeting law training. And in this fund is the elections budget. As you well know, we have an election cycle coming up, and that typically is funded out of the commission budget. In an effort to be conservative with those dollars and best practices always recommended by the elections office, we generally fund and broke it out this year for a general and a primary should it be necessary. And we have also put some dollars in there for the special ballot measure because we're coming up on the 10-year review, local government review. And just to be prudent, we wanted to make sure and have additional dollars in there for that ballot measure as well. Some of you have heard both staff and the commission themselves that legislation may impact some of those timelines, and there's best wait and see what happens with those. But they are on our radar, and been in discussions with the elections office on how that may impact our budget overall and timelines.
Do you have any approximate amount?
For the elections budget?
Yeah, that new stuff they're talking about at the zoo house.
I won't refer to it as that at the legislature. Overall, for the budget impact that it would have, I dropped the dollar amount as part of the budget constraints because, as some of you know, you've heard me talk about this, it's sort of a guessing game at best anyway about what elections will cost. There's so many unknowns. I get email strings that are several miles long. It feels like every time we do this with the elections office as to how many variables will factor into what the overall cost of an election is. So what we did was take historical numbers and try and average those out and make a best guess as to what they would cost. I don't think anything at the legislative level will necessarily impact the costs, or at least in a manner that wouldn't already be just another unknown variable. I know that's not a great answer, Mr. Mayor. It's just simply, it's a lot of guessing and hoping for the best, I guess, as far as how we fund that.
What would be different?
It mostly would impact the timeline. And so really what would happen is, as I understand it now, of course, there are amendments that could pop up and all of that, but As I understand it now, really what would happen is those dollars wouldn't necessarily have to be funded out of this fiscal year. It would really shift it into an additional fiscal year.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, 1 minute.
I don't think we're gonna have to worry about it this year, probably. I mean, the commission can do whatever they want, but. Whatever we want, but if we go out for a levy, say for a bond for. A new firehouse station. Or a public safety levy. Does that come out of the commission budget to fund that election, or does it come out of the department that's proposing the? Or I guess it's the commission that's proposing it, so.
Right, we would add that into the commission budget would be
Okay.
my recommendation.
Okay.
Mayor, I might add to that, we could also wrap those costs into the financing for the.
Okay.
For levy.
And I mean, this might be a moot point if everything moves to a primary and general election in even numbered years, but. That's something to maybe, I guess, be thinking about once we start the. Fire department discussion.
Fire and police.
Okay, continue, please.
So internal charges, I do want to make one clarifying mark on this one. These are largely out of our control, but, and I think Director Danielson and the manager have already talked about some of these adjustments related to insurance, but I want to clarify on the changes, I guess, in FY24 are reflective of the square footage, and there was a slight increase in our rents for the building. I've since talked to the facility superintendent, Troy Sampson. I misunderstood. So we actually lost, which seems odd, despite adding a record space, we lost square footage overall. Because we had more allocated, I think, for the larger office space than was necessary at that time in a shared space with finance. So we actually lost square footage, but our overall square footage costs went up slightly. So I just wanted to make that correction for the record. So that number did go up slightly, but it was not for the reason that I have on this slide. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions if you have them.
Go
I
ahead.
just want to comment, when she lost, I have to absorb that in my budget.
It's a chess match.
I hear you, I hear you. Okay, comments from the commission. Public comments. Madam Clerk.
There are no public comments online.
Okay, thank you. We're looking at State Attorney Office.
Hi, Commissioners, Mayor.
All right.
Both Amy Hakala, Assistant City Attorney, and I helped prepare this budget. You will see, par for the course, that there are more words here than there are numbers. So, and so we can just.
Mayor, I might add that hers is the longest presentation.
And I don't know if you heard the mayor, but he said typical lawyer.
I'm glad we're understood.
It is good shoulder.
But we will make it exciting and brief. So. We have 3 divisions in our office, the civil, criminal, and victim services divisions. And we'll just go through briefly each one of those and let you know what it is we do. I think that's something that you don't often hear or see from our office unless it comes before you in the commission. Civil division is the division that you would mostly be interacting with in the types of work that you see. We represent the city and the city commission in litigation, arbitration, administrative proceedings. Represent the city in collective bargaining negotiations for the union or the labor management associations within the city. We prepare and review ordinance and resolutions, and you see those. Prepare and review agreements, deeds, easements, other legal documents, and then provide ongoing daily advice to the city manager and department directors. As well as providing training to city departments and open records, supervising some others that you'll see as well. Some of the operational considerations and changes you'll see in our very small budget are that outside counsel and professional services has been decreased in the past couple of years. And we've absorbed those pieces of advice and litigation in our office as two of us at least, and hopefully more, are get hired into the attorney's office. And that is, for example, water rights advice and litigation that was spent outside our office is now absorbed inside our office because of the expertise we brought. HR matters, some other even litigation matters that we have seen can be absorbed in-house. And then that provides some ability for us not to have to spend money on outside counsel. The training is a limited budget. You've heard that already from other places where there's nowhere else to cut. So training, and that becomes a challenge because of new staffing. But we are able to provide some free pleas and other things and absorb that in our budget. So thanks.
So the second division we'll talk about is the criminal division. And what the criminal division does, so it's a team of 2 full-time prosecutors and 1 deputy city attorney who also will do some prosecution, as well as myself supervising those positions also in court some. And we prosecute misdemeanors and city code violations that are committed in city limits. And that's everything from traffic tickets and dogs off leash to serious crimes like partner family member assault and driving under the influence. We do all of the things that we need to prosecute those cases, like preparing court orders, petitions, affidavits, and briefs. There's appearances in it should be thousands of cases per year. So just this week, I looked at the court's docket of just the cases that we appeared in, and there were 93 case settings just this week, many of which were trials. Our case files often number into the 2,000 or 3,000 per year. It's a fast-paced law practice, and our staff are very flexible and do it well. We also provide training to the police department, both for trial purposes and on changing issues in criminal procedure.
Who are the 2?
Our 2 full-time prosecutors, there's Todd Baker is one, and we have a vacant position we're interviewing for next week.
I thought it was, oh, yeah,
It was Jennifer Barbie.
okay.
She just left us.
We do have some operational considerations and changes in this division. So we have a need for a replacement computer for court. And what that entails is right now we are cobbling together with a system that doesn't function very well. Going to jury trials often requires pretty intensive video editing of footage of the interaction, whether that be surveillance video or body worn camera footage from the police officers, because you aren't going to want to watch 2 hours straight of footage. And that has to be done within parameters set by IT for security and things like that. Right now, we have a system that freezes, it's slow, it doesn't function well. And we have a monitor that only works some of the time. So you'll see that request, which we think is pretty critical for our office. You will see a decrease in costs for software for yearly maintenance. Last year, we rolled out Carpel, which is a legal case management system that allows us to track the status of our thousands of cases a year in court, and for any of our prosecutors to type in a case number and find out exactly where the status of that case is. So we rely on that throughout the day, both in terms of attorneys and support staff. We're now rolled out with that, and we're decreasing just a yearly maintenance fee. So you'll see that. Any questions on the criminal division? And our third division is a division of one, and it's a very important division in our office. That's our victim services division. And the reason that position is on a separate budget is it is largely grant funded. So what that position does is she serves on various task forces like a high risk offender task force. She is a victim support specialist. She has extensive training and as well as a master's degree, and is able to provide outreach, support, information, and advocacy to victims of violent crime. So that would be like the partner, family member assaults and things like that. And she guides them through the legal justice system. And we've seen that be so transformative for victims in cases that they've come back. One of them came back and presented her with a piece of art that they had drawn for her as a thank you for how she supported them through the trial. So she helps prepare them for what to expect in court proceedings, which you can imagine can be very difficult and stressful if you're already a victim of a crime. And she manages her own grant, the Victims Crime Act grant, and tracks that.
Who is it?
Nicole Doyle.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And there are some operational considerations and changes here as well. This is the second year of biennial grant funding, and so there's no changes this year for funding the position. There are costs of required training that Nicole attends, and those have increased. Those are things like the cost of the training itself, as well as incidentals like a hotel room is more costly this year than it was last year. Her grant has funded most of the position in the past, but there's more competition for the grant looking to the future and less funds to disperse. I think we all in this room have heard that same story about various grants. And so when the grant doesn't fully fund the position, historically, the rest of that has been covered by the city. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. Yes.
Excuse me, I just wanted to clarify that the city has historically always funded a 25% match for that particular program.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Sheila.
But because of the grant funding, it's now matching at a little bit higher rate.
That 25% is actually required by the federal grant itself. You can't actually get the grant unless you pay for 25% and they pay 75%. So.
And just one more comment, we do get some victim services surcharge fees that help to offset those particular costs as well.
Gotcha. Please.
Do we know, and I don't know if this, Amanda, I don't know if she's better suited to answer something like this, but the public safety bill that was supposed to be like for the gun safety bill, but it was really a public safety bill that was passed last year that included a lot of local grants. Are we eligible? Do we know if we're eligible for any of that for like victim services?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that either, but we can certainly look into
Yeah.
it.
And it might be HPD that's better suited to, because I know part of it was like the mental health piece and then reducing recidivism of like misdemeanor charges, etc. But
The police department does utilize somebody who is trained in responding to, victim
right.
crimes that have victims to them, and they have really been helpful to our office as well. I think there's just one that does that.
Yes,
Yeah.
there is, and he also sits on the high risk offender task force,
Yeah.
and that would be a good group that I can follow up with because it includes also advocates, Friendship Center, Department of Corrections, things like that.
Yeah, it might be worth finding out because I don't think we've gone for any money from that bill yet.
Yeah.
And some of that focus may be more focused on the county level of service.
Yeah.
too.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's worth finding out though.
So this last slide is really the expenditures that we have in our office. It's really for the cost of running a law office, paralegal support, staff, IT costs, court filing fees, training, professional licensing, mailing costs. Those are all just reflected in the budget. Similarly, you will see separately in the budget sheets, you'll see victim services separate to that. And that's mostly because the grant itself requires separate reporting. And that's really all we have. That's the 3 divisions. That's what we do. Our budget's pretty simple and we're here for questions.
Commissioners? Public comments?
Mr. Mayor, I have no hands raised online and no written public comment.
Okay, at this time, we'll turn to Director Danielson.
Thank you, Mayor. So my budget this year is also conservative. We did have to increase some of our expenditures for, next slide, please. Well, I'll start off by indicating our divisions. So we kind of have 3 divisions within finances. Myself, the budget officer and the projects manager for our ERP software training. And then we have our accounting division that handles most of our treasury activities. And then our utility customer service division, which is on the first floor. That's responsible for utility billing, utility customer service, and licensing activities down there. So all in all, in fiscal 23, we budgeted, we had adopted about $1.582 million. We're projected to come in a little over that at 1.645. The reason for the variance is one, we experienced some health insurance costs there. It was a little bit unpredictable on what person would choose what plan. And depending upon the plan that someone chooses, it increases costs. So it gets to be a little bit notable when you're a smaller department like ours. We did administer a budget adjustment. So this year I just did a accounting exercise to call out our banking fees separately. Historically, our banking fees weren't transparent and they were being netted against our investment revenue and then allocated out. So I like to track banking fees so that when I go out for one, to make sure that we're being prudent in our banking activities, and 2, when we do go out for an RFP for banking services, and I'm not saying that will happen in the next year or 2, but when we do, I have then a historical track of what we've been paying for particular banking fees. So we just made that adjustment and it was offset by the increased investment revenue. And we didn't realize, although we did have vacancies, we didn't realize our full vacancy savings that were budgeted in fiscal 23. Our preliminary budget for fiscal 24 is 1.756 million. That is an increase over the prior year. We were able to, even though we did go through the exercise of cutting our budget by 6%. I think it actually cut it by a little bit more than that, so we could balance the general fund. But that's okay. I was able to partially restore training for our staff last year, or in this current fiscal year. None of my staff had any training allowance, including myself, and I have certifications that I have to maintain. I did add an additional allowance for a $6,800 for computer and cash drawer upgrades. I may be able to use our total ERP capital budget for that, but I wanted to put it in there because it wasn't part of the original scope. As we're going through the process, that hardware, we only budgeted 1 cash drawer and we actually need more. We need about 4 or 5 cash drawers. The utility billing distribution, we just went out for an RFP for those services. Those costs are increasing for printing and postage. We're just wrapping up getting our matrix looked at and making a decision on an agency, but with all of the proposals, those printing costs really increased. And so I'm looking forward to when we go launch our utility billing software, when we can reduce our printing and more people will go to, hopefully, I'm expecting go to a paperless billing system.
And that new system we got, that should help it, right?
Oh, yes, that will help administer that. Yeah.
Because I know you had an app where we used to pay utility bills on through the app. But we
You can still do
receive the
that.
paper copy.
You can, Mayor, you can still how it works now is you have to log in to the merchant portal, and then you can pay your bill, but that's all you can do. You can't go in and view your bill. You can't go manage and look at your history and your usage. You can just pay it and that's it. You don't even get to see a copy of your bill. When we go to the new system, you'll now be able to set up different types of alerts. You'll notices, you'll be able to view all your usage history. We won't be bringing in a lot of historical history, but going forward, you'll be able to see your utilization history, manage your payment information, get your bill emailed to you, or you can just log in and look at your bill. So it's going to be a really robust system. And I will tell you that we did try to move to an online billing system about 1.5 years ago. Staff spent about a year trying to get the data out of our current system to integrate with the new software. And after 1 year, we had to just call it quits. We just said, but it's just not working. So now we have to wait for our implementation of the new software. And so, like I said, they're scheduled for last. And so we're hoping by the end of 2025, people will be able to go for paperless billing. So get us into the 20th century, 21st, maybe the 19th. Yeah. We're also expecting our audit and actuary fees to increase. We went out for an RFP for audit services like we do every 3 years. I haven't received any responses, and I'm a little bit concerned about that because word on the street is that the CPA firms are dropping local governments because of the GASB standards and the more complex reporting requirements that governments have. I know that our current auditor will not be proposing to extend our audit. So that RFP is still out. We're waiting for responses. Sometimes they don't respond to the very end, but I am expecting a cost increase for those expenditures. And currently right now we're up to about 130,000 in credit card fees that we budget. This is part of our, we do build this in as a cost of doing business, but the city does absorb credit card fees. It is something that I'd like to revisit as a policy discussion at some point, because we do have, it's a percentage right now, it's a percentage of your bill. Like, so if you're, so we have very large commercial customers paying their utility bill with a credit card, and the city is eating the cost of that. So we need to revisit that.
But sometimes, different agencies add that low cost to the people if they use credit cards,
Yes, that's correct.
But maybe we need to let them know that, come on, man, we're in your city.
Thank you, Mayor. That is an option. It's considered a convenience fee versus the local government absorbing the fee.
Right.
And is something that has been on my list to try to address.
Well, our citizens are paying for it either way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
our citizens are paying for it either way.
Yes, because it's passed off in the fee structures. Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Next slide, please.
Sure.
So,
Comments?
well, oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
Yep.
I'm just curious, for the mailing service, who do we use?
Thank you, Commissioner Dean. Currently, we use Action Print.
Okay,
They're a local company.
Mhm.
We're very pleased with their services, and we're happy that they also responded to our RFP.
Good.
We've had just wonderful, fantastic customer service from them. But just like everybody else, their costs are going.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my cost is going up too, so I'm just forewarning you.
They are.
Okay, I'm going to be
Right,
brief
we're
on
gonna-
this next slide so that we can move on and wrap this up. So just some of our priorities for fiscal 2024, and this will be in our department narrative. Obviously, we're continuing to work on our software upgrade. I'm currently, have gone through most of the core financial suite with myself and other stakeholders throughout the city. That include the general ledger, purchasing, contracts, project management, budgeting, accounts receivable, and payments. We're starting the configuration and launch of the payroll suite, and that's concurrent with the HR suite that they'll be working on. The HR suite at the same time as we're working on the payroll suite and finance. And we'll be launching the community development permitting and licensing suite in May as well. So things are moving along with that. Again, in accounting, we did an RFP for a new audit firm. Our goal in this next coming year, hopefully with no vacancies, we'll be able to meet our filing deadlines. I will give a brief update on where we're at with our fiscal 2022 report. It's been in the auditor's office for a month and a half. And they, like everybody else, have the lack of staff to get it done. So, you know, they were patient with us, they got it late. And now we're being patient with them to get it back to us. And I appreciate all of the work that they do. But it's just the reality of the situation right now. And we'll be looking to implementing a new financial reporting module for the annual report with the new ERP system as well.
Okay.
In our budget, we're establishing new procedures and outreach assistance with departments with the help and guidance of Manager Burton. And we're the budgeting software is part of that core financial software that we're working on. In utility services, they'll begin working on their modules. And as I noted earlier, I'd like to begin working on an investment policy proposal and procurement policy development. Currently, the city uses the state's guidance for their policy, but I'd really like to have work with a couple other department heads and get our own city procurement policy in place.
You bet.
Anything else? I think that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Mayor, I just want to state that there's really within the general fund 2 positions that we're still discussing. One is required by statute that if the judge requests a bailiff, the police department has to provide it. There's legislation, and the judge is working with us. There's legislation right now where we might have a civil employee versus a sworn officer, and we'd like to follow that legislation through before we make a decision in the budget. The second position that I'm very interested in is the addition of a budget analyst within the finance department that would focus on the enterprise funds. And I've asked the public works department and the finance department to get together and see what a cost split and how that position would be structured. It's a position that we've had in the past. I think the workload's necessary to consider this, but no decision has been made, and we'll just work through that with the commission as we walk down the road.
Okay. Any other comments?
One comment I would have, and I think that it's not within the reality of our budget this year, just given everything that we know, but I think that it is something to just put on everyone's minds going into the next budget cycle, is that I really think we should start thinking about what a deputy city manager position looks like, which I'm sure Tim is going to bring this up. I think that we're just getting to a point where I think it's really critical that we have some backup, and also someone who has a broader knowledge of the whole organization, so that we do have kind of like that built-in succession planning. And I think it pairs well with the whole, market analysis, the steps. I mean, we're moving towards a point where we are a more sustainable organization. And I don't think it's realistic to even, probably consider something like that in this budget, but I think I would appreciate if everyone would just maybe have it at the forefront of their minds as we head into the next budget.
Mayor, Commissioner, point well taken. It actually is on the list of positions that are considered new positions, did not make the cut. But I do believe based upon health insurance decisions, and if this budget goes through substantially, your budget, but financially, if it goes through, I think we're going to be in a better position next year to have a serious discussion about that than we will be this year. And so it's on the list. It's going to stay on the list. I think that the comparatives of those positions in the state of Montana and discussions that I've had with the city managers that have that position, we're getting ready for that discussion, to have a serious discussion in next year's budget.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Any public comments? Madam Clerk.
No public comments at this time, in no hands raised.
Thank you. HR, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. So I am here on behalf of Director McMahon. She was unable to attend. For those of you that may not know me, I'm Andrea Decker. I'm the HR generalist. And I'm probably going to make this fairly brief as I don't typically do this. So I might miss some things, and please feel free to ask questions at any time.
Good experience, though.
Yes, it's great experience. It just unanticipated this week. So thank you for letting me sit in. A lot of our focus will be on continuing to support other departments. A lot of that comes back with recruitment and retention. As Manager Burton has already discussed, there was a lot of things that went into looking at those insurance premiums, that 9% increase, the market study that we've done. And we appreciate his support on looking at those outliers, you know, the employees that are farthest behind, and looking at that 4% COLA. When you look at our budget for fiscal year 24, there's not a lot of change from prior years. A lot of it is status quo, and I believe some of that increase is that 6% in operating costs. I hope someone would correct me if I'm wrong. As you see, we do have a few notable expenditures. One of that is part of that funding that pay plan study. So we are continuing. It was a two-phase project, and we did have some of it budgeted, you know, for this year and continuing into next year. With the ERP implementation and the HR side of things, starting to work on that this year, it will also mean that some of our market planning for prior year may have to get extended out a little farther than we originally anticipated. There's been discussions about, you know, trying to look at our pay plan at the same time that we're implementing an ERP system. And there's a lot of work that our finance department will be doing with that. So that's part of that market plan and study. The second phase of it really is looking at the structure of our pay matrix and trying to determine if that really is working for us as a compensation system. We're aware that we've gotten behind and we've been working to try to catch ourselves up, but we just want to see if what we use with those grades and the pay steps really works for us, or if there should be some adjustment, you know, if there needs to be a totally different structure or just different steps added, so that hopefully we can have long-term sustainability and fiscal responsibility while we look at pay and the market continuing to go up in costs for inflation and other wages and everything with that. But other things, so we are fully staffed in HR. We had a lot of turnover in recent years. So there are still 3 of us that are new in our positions, less than a year in each of them. So this year we'll also have a lot of getting us more trained up and, you know, continuing to grow and develop in our roles. Beyond that, there is, I guess I should jump back to the notable expenditures. I kind of skipped myself there. So we were looking for a laptop for Director McMahon. And then there's also looking to transfer that fire testing consortium budget to the fire department. But other than that, I don't know if you'd like me to comment on anything else or actually read any numbers to you, or if you just like look at the packets and.
Comments or questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Decker. This has probably been asked a lot. Electronic pay stubs.
Yes. So we are very excited for the new ERP, the new ERP software. Part of the HR implementation will be get, all of that information in there. And once we go live, it will include electronic pay stubs, as there will be an employee portal where they can actually go in and view all of this information. So.
Maybe just a brief follow-up. I should have asked you this. How about paperless utility billing?
So that is the Commissioner Logan, that is the direction we're going, is paperless
Yeah.
utility billing. That we still will have an option, some people like that piece of paper, but I think more people are getting accustomed to paperless billing through their utilities and medical bills and things like that. So and in addition, right now, of course, we print everybody's pay stub, right? And then there's no, and they're on these precious seal forms that cost a lot of money. And what will happen, and Andrea can speak more to this if you like, but there'll be an employee portal. And in that portal, you'll be able to do your time and attendance. So all of our paper time cards will go away. And we'll log our time electronically. It'll pass through a management checkoff, and then it'll get incorporated into the payroll system in order to process their payroll. Employees will be able to go into the portal and be able to manage their deductions. They'll be able to see their pay stubs. So if an employee needs something for a mortgage, they don't have to come to us to dig through paper and print off, and go right into the portal, print off their pay stub from, going forward. We won't be bringing in his history, but with pay stubs, but going forward, all of your historical pay stubs will be there. You can view your medical information. If you want to change your W-2, you can go in and change that. You can change your address. You can change your deduction for your, pension or, 457 contributions, I believe. And so it'll be very nice.
Thank you both.
I hope we're keeping a tab of everything we're gonna save with this.
Yeah, well, and to add on to Director Danielson, nearly everything she mentioned is at least one, if not multiple pages of paper that are required to be printed. And then they also have to physically travel around to each person that needs to approve it. So it's a lot of time and effort spent on trying to get that document complete. And then it also might involve getting entered into numerous locations between the payroll system, the HR, the insurance side of things. There's a lot of manual work that goes with it. So it's going to be a pretty heavy lift to help get us there so we can actually be working in the new system, but it's going to be amazing when we get there.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Ms. Decker, thank you very much for your presentation. And thanks for your enthusiasm for this as well. And Director Danielson, thank you. I'm excited for electronic billing. I'm excited for electronic paychecks. I'm a state employee as my day job. It's really nice to be able to look at.
Get paychecks.
I do. Yeah. So, but being able to have these, it'd be nice to see the savings with the lens of sustainability. I think this is where each department, each division does their part and it all adds up. And I think that can go towards that plan. It would be nice to see how much we're saving financially as well. But the idea of having this online and being able to opt out I don't opt in, opt out, or just say, hey, you get to make the choice. I think that's gonna be really nice. So thank you. It'd be really neat to see how much it's gonna save our taxpayers. So thanks.
Okay. Are you done, ma'am?
I hope so.
Okay.
I had a question, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Wow, I'm echoing. Help. Am I echoing?
No, you're not.
Okay, I'm echoing. Okay. With regard to the COLA, it would be helpful to understand what the 4% total, what does that amount to? And would a change in percentage, what would a percentage up or down in either direction translate to? And I don't know if we can answer that today, but it would be helpful to understand those huge numbers in the context of the budget. Thank you.
Yes.
Mary, you have that number in context of the general fund. And so when we evaluate a COLA, the general fund, as Manager Burton put it, sets the stage for the rest of the funds. You can't really, it's not really fair to implement a 10% COLA in the enterprise funds and a 4% COLA in the general fund. So when we were looking at this, the cost of what each percent in the general fund was, it was $125,000 for every increase in percentage for a COLA in the general fund. I could look to see what the and get the information for you for the citywide. I just know we were really focused in on what the impact was when the general fund, when we were going through that exercise.
Thank you, Director Danielson. It would be helpful just to know citywide, just so we're hearing percentages, but what that translates to is useful knowledge, at least for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comments? Madam Clerk,
Mr. Mayor, I have no hands raised and no written public comment online.
any final comments from the commission?
Good job.
This meeting is adjourned.
Get it.